Well now, come on in out of the cold. Hang that coat up and pull yourself close to the fire. She's burning real steady tonight. Good, honest fire. I've been sitting here since sundown, just thinking, the way a man does when the world finally gets quiet enough to let him. And I want to ask you something tonight. Something I've been turning over in my mind a good long while. When is the last time you went a whole hour without something pulling at you? Not a person, not your children calling, not your neighbor at the door, but that little machine in your pocket, buzzing, chirping, lighting up, telling you something needs your attention right now, always right now. I reckon most folks can't remember. I reckon some of you are feeling that pull even right now, sitting here, trying to be still. And something in the back of your mind is already wondering, what did I miss? My grandfather, Elias, he never once in his entire life felt that feeling. Not because he was simple, not because the world had nothing to say to him, but because the world had to wait its turn. If somebody needed Elias, they came to find him. They walked to his farm. They knocked on his door. They stood in his yard and called his name. And until they did that, until a real human being made that effort, Elias was left alone. His thoughts were his own. His attention belonged to whatever was right in front of him. The field he was plowing, the fire he was tending, the face of the person sitting across the supper table. That kind of quiet, we ain't even got a word for it anymore, because we ain't got the thing itself. Tonight, I want to take you back to a time when a man's mind was his own from sunup to sundown, when the day had a shape to it, and silence wasn't something you had to fight for. It was just the way things were. Pull up close, let the fire do its work, and let's remember together what life felt like before the world learned how to follow you everywhere you go. In 1850, a man's day had a beginning and it had an ending. And between those two things, it had a shape, a real shape. You could feel it. My grandfather was up before first light, not because an alarm told him to be, because the animals needed tending, and the day wasn't gonna wait. He'd pull on his boots in the dark, splash cold water on his face from the basin, step out into the morning air, and for the next several hours he worked, steady and quiet, just him and the land and whatever the good Lord saw fit to send that morning. Now here's something I want you to study on. Nobody interrupted him, not once, not a single time. From the moment he stepped out that door to the moment he came back in for breakfast, his mind was entirely his own. He thought about the fence line that needed mending, He thought about the weather coming in from the west. He thought about whatever the good Lord put on his heart that morning. His thoughts moved slow and deep, like a river that ain't in any particular hurry, not jumping from one thing to the next, not scattered across a dozen different voices all talking at once. Just one thought, then another, at whatever pace the morning set. A linear was the same way, up before the men. Fire built back up from the coals, water fetched, cornbread started. And for those quiet morning hours, her mind was entirely her own too. She'd think about the garden, about the quilt she was piecing together, about the letter she wanted to write to her sister down in Georgia. Not because somebody reminded her, not because a little red number appeared somewhere telling her she had unfinished business, just because those were her thoughts and they had room to breathe. I tell you, there is something that happens to a person when their thoughts have room to breathe. Something good, something that most of us today are so starved for, we don't even know what we're missing. We just know something ain't right. We just know that days go by fast, but we can't quite remember what we did in them. Now, here is something that struck me, something a man told me once that I ain't ever forgotten. He said, "Silas, the human mind wasn't built to hold 100 conversations at once. It was built to hold one, just one, and do it proper." In 1850, that's exactly what folks did. One thing at a time. Not because they were slow, because they were wise enough to know that's the only way anything gets done right. Now let me tell you about news. Because in 1850, news traveled slow, and that slowness was a gift. If something happened in the next county, you might hear about it 3 days later, a week later, sometimes longer. Somebody would ride in, or the mail would come, or a neighbor would stop by on his way through, and he'd sit down, have a cup of something, and tell you what he knew. And you'd listen, really listen, because this was the only telling you were going to get. There wasn't another version coming in 5 minutes. There wasn't 100 different people all shouting their opinion about it. Just one man sitting at your table telling you what he saw. Then he'd go, and you'd think about what he told you for a day, maybe 2. Let it settle. Turn it over. Come to your own mind about it. In peace, without 17 other voices jumping in before you'd finished your first thought. My grandmother Eleanor, she got 1 letter a month from her sister. 1. And Lord have mercy the way she treated that letter. She'd see it come in and she wouldn't open it right away. She'd set it on the mantel, let it sit there through supper, and after the dishes were done and the children were settled, she'd sit down by the lamp and she'd open it, slow and careful, like it was something precious. Because it was. She'd read it once through, then she'd fold it back up and sit with it a while. Just sit, thinking about her sister, feeling the distance between them and the connection that letter carried across that distance. Then she'd read it again, slower this time, Every word. I watched her do that many times as a boy, and I didn't understand it then. But I do now. She was giving that letter the attention it deserved, the attention that another human being's words deserved. Not a quick glance and a scroll to the next thing, but real, unhurried, grateful attention. We send 100 messages a day now and read 'em the same way we drive past telephone poles, one after another, none of 'em quite landing, none of 'em quite felt. I reckon Eleanor got more out of that one letter a month than most folks today get out of 1,000 messages a week, because she was actually there when she read it, her whole mind, her whole heart, right there. Let me tell you about something Tommy did once. He was about 10 years old. I'd sent him out to mend a section of fence down by the lower pasture. Good hour's walk from the cabin, maybe more. He was gone all morning, just him and the fence posts and the wire and the open field. No company, no distraction, just the work and the sky and the sound of the wind coming through the grass. He came back at noon, sat down at the table, and he started talking. Talked about things he'd been thinking about, questions he had about things he'd seen out in that field, a hawk he'd watched for a long time, a strange cloud formation, an idea he'd worked out in his head about how to fix the drainage ditch that kept flooding. Good ideas, careful ideas, the kind that take time to form, the kind that only come when a mind has been left alone long enough to do its own work. Eleanor looked at me across the table, and she smiled, the way she did when something pleased her deep down, because she knew a boy who can spend a morning alone with his own thoughts and come back with something to show for it, that boy is going to be all right. The pioneer mind was a working mind, not because folks were smarter, but because their minds were allowed to work. No interruptions every 4 minutes, no little voice from their pocket saying, "Look at this, respond to this, don't miss this, what do you think about this?" Just the work, and the mind moving through it, finding its own way, at its own pace, all the way to the end. There's a word for that. Folks today call it deep focus, and they sell books about how to get it back. They build apps to help you stop looking at other apps. They wear special headphones. They go to retreats. All to get back something that every farmer in 1850 had every single day, without trying, without thinking about it, because nobody had taken it from them yet. But here's the part that gets me most. The evenings. Come sundown in 1850, the day was done. Really done. Not almost done. Not done except for these 12 things I still need to check. Done. The tools were put up. The animals were settled. The fire was going. Supper was on the table. And after supper, folks sat on the porch if the weather allowed, by the fire if it didn't. And they talked to each other, the actual people in the room, not to somebody far away, not to a screen, to the faces right in front of them. Elias would sit in his chair, Eleanor in hers, the children on the floor or the porch steps, and they'd talk about the day, what happened, what they saw, what they thought about. And then, after a while, they'd go quiet. Not an uncomfortable quiet, a settled quiet. The kind that means everyone is at peace. Everyone is where they're supposed to be. Nothing is missing. I reckon that kind of evening is what most of us are really looking for when we sit down at the end of a long day and we reach for that phone. We ain't looking for more noise. We're looking for that quiet. We just forgot where it lives. It don't live in the phone. It never did. It lives in the same place it always lived, in the fire, in the faces of the people you love, in the stillness that comes when you finally put the thing down. Fire's burned down low now, that good deep orange glow, steady and warm. And I find myself thinking about Elias again, the way I often do this time of evening. Big man, quiet man, a man whose attention was never split, never scattered, never pulled in 14 directions at once. When Elias looked at you, he looked at you, all of him, every bit of his attention, right there, on your face, on your words. You ever had somebody look at you like that? Really look? Like you were the only thing in the world worth paying attention to right now? Lord, there ain't much better than that, in this world or any other. That's what undivided attention feels like. And in 1850, that's just how folks were with each other. Not because they were special, because nothing was pulling them away. Nothing was buzzing in their pocket. Nothing was lighting up on the wall. Nothing was whispering, something else is happening somewhere else. You're missing it. You need to go look. They weren't missing anything, because everything worth having was right there, in that room, by that fire, with those people. Now, I ain't telling you to throw your phone in the river, though I'll tell you what, some evenings that thought crosses my mind. But I am saying this. What if one evening this week you put it down, just for an hour, set it face down somewhere you can't see it light up, and sat with the people in your house, or alone if that's what you got, with the quiet, with the fire if you have one, with the sound of the evening coming in through the window, and just let your mind be where your body is. No pulling, no buzzing, no missing anything, because you are right there, all of you, present, the way Elias was present every single evening of his life. I reckon you'd be surprised what you find in that quiet. I reckon you'd find that it ain't empty at all. Not even close. Well, fire's nearly out now, and I find I'm ready. I hope you are too.